Take this opportunity to direct your attention to tarpley.net, my website. There you can find ways to buy the essential books without which you cannot understand the passing parade. That would include 9/11 Synthetic Terror, Made in USA, available also in French and Italian and Spanish. You can find Obama, the Postmodern Coup, The Making of a Manchurian Candidate, available in German and Japanese. You can find Barack H. Obama, The Unauthorized Biography, and Surviving the Cataclysm, Your Guide to the Worst Financial Crisis in Human History. All of that at tarpley.net. Now, let's continue with this geopolitical analysis. Obama in Asia, right? The Korean naval shooting incident, first in 7 years, so convenient to keep Hatoyama in line, whatever Hatoyama represents. With China, the big issue is economic warfare. They want the renminbi, the people's dollar, the yen, the yuan, to float. They want it to float up. They want to relieve pressure on the U.S. dollar by having the Chinese currency upvalued, revalued, as it used to be called. So a clash looming about that. The Chinese, of course, holding between 1 and 2 trillion of U.S. Treasury paper and continuing to buy more, despite what Robert Fisk seems to say about it. The Chinese also developing their own civilian commercial airlines business, COMAC. China is building aircraft. It's a multi-decade commitment to challenge the world supremacy of Boeing, the U.S. manufacturers, and Airbus. It's going to be 10,000 planes over the next 15 years in Asia. The Chinese wish to be a part of that. Notice we have that CIA agent called the Dalai Lama causing trouble by visiting India and stirring up the Chinese on the verge of this, right? Trying to make sure that Obama brings up the Dalai Lama in his visit. Also, the U.S. government is doing a review of Chinese cyber warfare events. Remember this August 2008 cyber attack on various U.S. government political websites. Well, remember, that was at the time that the Rabia Kadir organization had provoked all that trouble in Xinjiang province, Chinese Turkestan. So if you leave the Chinese alone, they will not come after you. It's actually a policy of deterrence that the Chinese have. Now let's shift gears into economics. We've got a situation of serious dollar weakness once again. The dollar at a 15-month low against a basket of currencies. And what we're finding is that central banks are actually trying to shore up the dollar. Part of it is that the low dollar makes these other currencies very high compared to a whole series of international benchmarks, and this is strangling exports from a whole bunch of countries that depend very much on exports. So the Wall Street Journal tells us that Thailand, South Korea, Russia, and the Philippines have been doing support operations for the dollar, or in effect, reverse support operations. They're trying to support operations to bring the dollar up and to bring their own currencies down, which is the main thing. Brazil is also part of it. Taiwan is taking internal administrative measures to try to take some pressure off the dollar. Now, we've got all kinds of debate now about the dollar, the weakness of the dollar, now a political issue inside the United States. George F. Will the Shill, with his connections to the Hollinger Corporation of yore, strongly British connected. This is now the anti-dollar party in the U.S., looming with British support. So Will says Obama's gambling with the dollar, and points out that, the gold is now over $1,100 for an ounce of gold, and how China is buying gold, although not enough to make a difference. India buying gold. So this is generally the idea that the Obama deficit policies are going to sink the dollar. That's Will the Shill. Now, you've also got Samuelson quotes Nouriel Roubini, right? Nouriel Roubini, the once obscure NYU, New York University economist, and his basic thing is, well, the Fed is lending at 0%, right? The dollar carry trade we've talked about in past weeks. Investors and speculators are now using 0% borrowing to stoke a new bubble. Stocks, bonds, gold, oil, minerals, foreign currencies, prices going up, up, up. What happens when that bubble runs out of steam? You've got an interesting cartoon in the Washington Post this week. It shows one of those old stock tickers, and it says up, 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 and the guy says it looks like everything's hunky-dory, and this is all taking place within a bubble that he's blowing for himself. Take a look at it. Tom Toll's Washington Post. The Tobin tax is gaining momentum. There's an essay by Ellen Brown in favor of the Tobin tax. But, of course, in the background, the economy continues collapsing. 10.2% jobless, as we pointed out last week, really means 18% unemployed, underemployed, discouraged workers, those who never came out. Add those all in, and it gets up to the neighborhood of 20 to 25%. Unemployment is at a 26-year high, and the stock market is at a 14-month high. The FHA, Federal Housing Administration Reserve Fund, is at a 7-year low. Fannie Mae has just chalked up $19 billion of losses, and a $15 billion request from the TARP is now put in. Now, in the middle of this continued pattern of economic collapse, we've had the Capmark bankruptcy, the CIT bankruptcy. These continue apace. We have now the political fight about the future status of the Federal Reserve. Now, this obviously has to do with the fact that the Federal Reserve has failed again. The Federal Reserve is supposed to be a bank regulator. They've failed. They always fail. They failed in 1929. They failed in 1931. They failed in the year 2000. They have failed now in 2008, 2009. Now, Senator Dodd of Connecticut, fighting for his political life against a whole field of challengers, is coming up with a plan to reform the Fed. This is basically a ploy to do two things, to help Dodd to survive politically and to make a show of cutting down the power of the Fed, but not really doing anything serious. What it would mean is to strip the Federal Reserve of its bank regulating powers, which it doesn't use anyway, to create a consumer finance protection organization, and to then go on and look into the 12 Federal Reserve districts. This is interesting. The articles about this have to face the fact that the 12 Federal Reserve districts are private property, and that 6 members of those boards are appointed by local bankers without even the formality of a Senate confirmation hearing. So Dodd says, well, we should now get them confirmed by the Senate. This means nothing. Clashing with Dodd is an even worse and even weaker plan coming from Obama and Barney Frank. Now, you see the line of the Wall Street Journal, the Washington Post is, don't politicize the Fed. If bankers run the Fed, this is thought to be purely technical, purely a matter of economics and science. But if you say, as Dodd says, that other social forces, and he's got a list of the groups that he wants to bring in, if you bring in other people to somehow be on these boards or exercise some oversight, that's politicization. Now, needless to say, all of this is quite inadequate. The demand is nationalize the Fed. Nationalize the Fed. This Fed becomes the Bank of the United States, a bureau of the U.S. Treasury, and what it does is determined by law. Size of the money supply, interest rates, and approved categories of lending, all determined by public laws from the House, Senate, and the President. Plus, we recreate the Glass-Steagall private, the firewall, and we'll be back in a minute.